thank me for the wonderful song I did for them. And it wasn't me. It was another 89-year-old guy. He's out there somewhere, I'm sure. Chris and I got a project here. I'm with my grandson, Chris Sand. I'm trying to save words here, time, for all of us. I'm here with my grandson, Chris Sand, to acknowledge my brother, Chris Sand, who wrote cowboy poetry and performed here for several years before his death a couple of years ago. We think it appropriate now, in Memorial Day weekend, to report that he spent 3.5 years in England during World War II as an engineer officer with a squadron of B-24s. At one point, they moved to North Africa so they could effectively bomb out the Ploesti oil fields. The squadron received a unit citation for this, and Chris was awarded the Bronze Star for meritorious achievement during that time. Chris was born in 1917 in our homestead shack on the East Fork of Wolf Creek, north of Wolf Point, on the Fort Peck Indian Reservation. I came along 2 years later. From 1915 on, homesteaders sort of spotted the reservation lands. Lots of room between neighbors, lots of wonderful open range, which at first was free range. Later, we had to pay some grazing fees per head. Our Indian folk were and still are a naturally generous people. But there got to be too many horses out there. They had to introduce the big government roundup. I've asked young Chris here to present this one of my brother's poems entitled The Government Roundup, because it explains how some really rank and unruly broncs can be handled in a critical situation. We did a lot of broomtail chasing in our day, even more exciting than horse racing, which they call the sport of kings. We came through the 30s. We could have been called poor, but I think I have some peers out there among you folks who will agree with me that if you are mounted on a really good saddle horse, you can really feel like a king. So I'll turn this over to Chris to do his poem.
Summer of the Government Roundup by my great uncle Chris Sand. Back in the early settlement days, when I was barely 11, chasing horses and cattle around made Wolf Creek seem like heaven. Life was rife in that old stream, some 20-odd miles from town. The fish and frogs and birds and dogs filled the wind with a cheerful sound. The summer I best remember was 1929. A government roundup was coming around to gather the wild equine. The Fort Peck Res was open range. Horse grazing the ranchers was free. The cattle now, mind you, were counted by brand. $1 a head was their fee. Indian cowboys were running this show. The best hands around, it was said. But if your steeds got caught in their gather, the bailout was $2 a head. I rode with an old Irish cowboy named Pat, pounded leather till 8 days was gone. We'd hustle our horses and fence them up tight to save bailing them out later on. When the roundup came by, we could hear them on Mill Fork, not far away. We galloped on over and checked for our brands and their herd that got bigger each day. Then the chuck wagon gathered us in. Shorty Lawati was cook. The way he prepared his beef biscuits and beans belonged in a recipe book. Cutting went well till the ending. Trouble came with a big wild-eyed black. I'd cut him out with my fast little mare and he'd run over us both and get back. Help came from 2 Indian cowboys. Bill Knorr and Frank Beaudry were there. The Mustang charged him a couple of times, so they shook out their ropes in the air. Oh, they roped him and threw him and tied him, put a pinch of black dust in each eye. And when they released him, he'd lost all his starch, and to drive him was easy as pie. I thought at the time that it happened, those men were too hard on that horse, but he was just fine in an hour or so, and they'd done what they had to, of course. I'll always remember that summer. I think of it still in my dreams. I'll never get over my days